Okay, forget that. Forget work from home. What about reports from home?
Remote reporting.
You're right. And instead of lab every day, it's report every day.
No, that's not enough. What you want to do is you want to report every hour. Then you print them out, right? You take those emails, you print them out, and then you make like a little flip book so you can see the
Oh
Am I the only one that does that?
Yeah. Well, yes. Are they going to your house or where are you sending them?
No, I send them all to a printer in Austin.
Of course, to the faith store.
Yeah, it's sitting there. There's no paper. It's completely out of toner. There's a giant pile next to the recycling bin.
Oh, that's awful. All right, no, wait, but just seriously for a second, there's this post on Thwack that I saw yesterday that somebody's inherited their Orion instance. We've talked about this before, and they just need to come up with basic reports. And we've got, a bunch of resources on how to do the heavy duty stuff. But Patrick, have we covered basic reporting on Lab before?
Over the last 5 years, yeah, we've touched on it a couple of times, but there's been so many changes in the last couple of releases. I'm not sure that we have, and especially to your point, like if we've inherited a whole bunch of them and there's 100 or more in the system, maybe we ought to go back and talk about how to actually do a little spring cleaning.
All right, so someone's got to actually commit to doing a lab episode on basic reporting. We got to figure. All right.
Hey guys, sorry I'm late. What did I miss?
Crystal.
You know what? It might just be perfect timing. We were talking about basic reporting and how Lab hasn't done that in a while. Do you have anything in your travels about how to set up just the, general, just the basic stuff?
Sure. How many reports have I set up or helped set up over the last 9 years with hundreds of different clients? Too many.
Okay. So do you feel like making that your first Lab episode as a head geek?
Oh, yeah. That sounds like a good time. Who wants to join me?
You know what? I'm always down for a Lab episode, so I'll do this one with you.
Sounds like a quorum of two.
Fantastic. All right, let's make this happen.
Before we get started, I want to talk about a few assumptions going in. I assume that you have a need for a report. I don't really need to know why. I also assume that you're not an advanced report creator, meaning you maybe have dabbled with the built-in reports, maybe you've customized one or two, maybe you've looked around but you ran out of time or you ran out of patience trying to figure out how to get that working. So today I want to show you a couple of options from the very basic to the little bit more advanced to help make your reports a little bit better. So all of the reports that I'm going to showcase today are reports that I've created and used in production environments over the last several years to help solve a problem. And if it solves a problem for you and you like the report, please feel free to download it from the Thwack Content Exchange.
And if you have questions for us as we're going through things, feel free to ask us in the chat window that you see off to the side. And if you don't see a chat window off to the side, that means you're doing this wrong because you should be watching Lab live. To do that, you want to go to lab.solarwinds.com and that'll tell you when the upcoming episodes are so you can jump on and watch live and ask your questions. You can also go there to find the archive of our past episodes and see what you might have missed.
So let's jump right in. First, you need to know how to get to Manage Reports, which is where we're going to create our reports. So we're going to go from our home summary page, we're going to go to settings, and then we're going to go all settings. Now you might wonder why I'm not going to reports. And the answer to that is
I was going to ask that, yeah.
It takes the same number of steps, and it's just an old preference of mine to go through the settings page. I've been using SolarWinds Orion for a very long time, and finding things through the setting pages, these menus did not exist. And now that they do, I find myself just going back and forth to the old settings pages. So it's a little bit more manageable to me because we want to go into Manage Reports. The Reports menu up here takes you into Viewing Reports, so you still have to go to Manage Reports from there. So we're going to go into our Alerts and Reports section here, and we're going to select Manage Reports. And we're going to see there's like a ton of out-of-the-box reports, but we're not going to use any of those. What we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new report. And this report's going to be very simple. So you see immediately we popped up a screen because I've either never been in this screen before on this Orion instance in the account that I'm logged in, or I've just never checked this box to never show this again. So what we want to do is you can see here there's a lot of information that says, some basic stuff of what you can do. And then you can just click on the Get Started because we don't need that. There's a lot of options jumping right in, and a lot of people are inclined to maybe ignore this or take a little gander and see what's in there. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Right now, we're going to use the reports resources. We're going to use the custom table. Now, you can use the custom table, you can use custom chart. The custom chart is a little bit more advanced only because you do require a time series. It's a little fidgety when you try to do something very specifically custom. So we're going to use the custom table. And it's going to take us right into adding that content. So you have a few options here for selecting your method. So you can select specific objects. So we can go in here and say, I want node X and node Y only. I don't care about anything else. You can use the dynamic query builder, which is the default, or you can use the advanced database query with SQL or Swiggle. And we're not going to get into that right now. I'm going to talk about it a little tiny bit later, but it's a little more advanced than what I want to get into in this session. So we're going to leave it on the dynamic query builder. You have two options, basic selector and advanced selector. You can see already I want to report on node. It's going to automatically select all nodes. Do we want to select all nodes? Yes, but also we want to add a condition. So we're going to add a condition, and I'm going to change this because the report that I want to create is based on interfaces. So we're going to come in here and we're going to find interface, and we're going to change it to interface. Now, it's going to select all interfaces, and that's not what we want. I'm going to tell you what we're going to look for today. What we're going to look for is interfaces that have been re-indexed. A lot of times you'll notice, or you may not have ever noticed in your Orion instance, that you have orphaned interfaces. They're unknown. Most of the time that comes about from an interface being re-indexed. So it changes to a negative index value, and that forces it to be orphaned by Orion. So you're no longer going to be collecting your statistics on that interface. It could be an important interface, I don't know. So what I like to do as kind of a cleanup tool is I like to create a report that tells me when I have orphaned interfaces so I can go rediscover them and add them to my environment. And you could also do that with a regular network discovery to regularly add your new interfaces in. But it's still nice to be able to go in there and clean up the old ones that no longer matter.
Right. And I want to point out for those folks who come from a network background that you may be aware that there's a Cisco iOS command that forces your network devices not to re-index, to keep their index number no matter what else changes. However, not all devices have that capability. So other operating systems and other network vendors don't always have that do not re-index. And so this report really allows you to know when important interfaces have dropped off the list or are no longer collecting stats.
Yes, absolutely. So you'll notice too, I mentioned the basic selector and the advanced selector. The basic selector is going to give you drop down field, and this is all it's going to let me do. This doesn't do what I need it to do. There's no information here for the interface index. This is what I need to look for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch it to the advanced selector. What that's going to do is give me now a button, and I'm going to select that button, and I can now select anything I want from the database that is related to this table in the database. So what I want is I want to find this interface index field right here. You can use the search up top, but what I want to do is I want to just use interface index. So we're going to select it and add that. And we're going to say is less than 0 because it becomes a negative value in the database. I happen to know this just by working with it for a very long time. You may not have known this ahead of time.
Right. And the other thing is that if you're used to creating custom alerts, which I think more people generally, when they're getting started with Orion, end up creating alerts again sooner than they have to create a custom report, then the interfaces look a lot similar when you go to that advanced selector.
Yes, absolutely. So then we can name it. So we're going to name our data source. And the reason why you want to name your data sources is if you eventually do want to add more resources to this report, you can select from the dropdown of data sources for your new resources. So you don't have to recreate them. So if you're later, you've been messing around with reports for a really long time and you get more comfortable, you can add different data type sets. And if they're named, you know what they are. So we're going to name it re-indexed interfaces, because that tells me what I need to know. And add to layout. And it is going to immediately jump us into editing that custom table. So we're going to select what fields we want in here. We're going to add some columns, and I'm going to add from my interfaces, which is automatically deselected. We're going to select caption because we want the name of it. And I'm going to add the interface index just to show you what that kind of looks like. And then I'm also going to add the status, which is down here. I'm gonna add the status so that you know what that interface status is. And then I'm also gonna go in here and I'm gonna change this to a different property that's connected, which is our node, because I wanna know what device this is attached to. An interface name is all well and good, but without a node device name, you're not gonna know what that's from. A lot of them are gonna be the same. You know, you've got your fast Ethernet, and then you're gonna be like, well, what device does this go to? That's not helpful for me.
Yeah. WAN port 1, where? Which one? Yeah.
So we're going to select our fields. These are all the fields that I want to add, and I'm going to hit add column. So now that they've been added, you can see there's 2 caption fields, and that's not going to make any sense later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange a little bit. So I'll drag and drop. It's very lovely. And I'm going to select advanced, and then I'm going to rename this. So you can see this is the field in the database. It's node caption. So what I'm going to say is this is our node name. And then in the interfaces one, I'm going to rename that one to interface name. You guessed it. Great. And then I can name our table. I'm just going to stick with the same name because that is what it is.
Yeah, don't get creative and call something like Blue Mountain Hamsters. Like, really name things what they are. You're not going to appreciate. Future you is going to hate present you if you start doing something cutesy.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll be so confused later. Or if you leave the company, then some poor soul who has to come in there afterwards is going to be very confused. Yeah. So we're going to correct that. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of these other options later, but you can use this preview resource to see what it's going to look like. It'll just pop up right on the screen for us, and this is what it's going to end up looking like. And submit. So you'll notice that the first thing I did wasn't name my report. The first thing it had me do was add things, and that's by default. So now we need to name it. You can add a subtitle, you can, which can be like a more descriptive information if you need it, or it can be like a time range. I've used that if I build reports that are like monthly, yearly, you know, they're on a time frame, then I'll come in here, I'll name them basically the same, then I'll put their time frame in the subtitle or something like that. Or if you wanted to add, I don't know, anything else in there, you could. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump to our finished report so you can see what it looks like. Now, this is good information. This is information that tells me that these devices have lost those interfaces. Maybe they've been re-added, and we need to go in here and we need to clean these up because they're not collecting statistical information, they're not collecting status anymore, and they're not useful to us in our monitoring. We need to go add the new ones that are useful to us.
Right, and this also underscores the difference philosophically between an alert and a report. I think some people will look at this event, right, that an interface becomes re-indexed and say, I need to know about that right away. Really? 2 o'clock in the morning, you need a page to wake you up out of bed because an interface re-index? I mean, maybe, but I would say not across the entire enterprise. So that's where you would create a report and schedule it to go out every Monday morning and say, all right, help desk, this is your cleanup list for Monday morning, or whatever it is. That's what a report is meant to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And these, like, as I mentioned, this is really useful if you are the administrator of your SolarWinds platform, because then later when they come yell at you because you didn't know that, you know, some interface out there was maxed out or dropping a ton of packets or something, it's because you didn't know it had been re-indexed and you're not monitoring the new interface. So that is a problem that we want to be able to solve. So this is mainly used for keeping your Orion instance clean for me. So that was like a very basic, simple report. Only one single condition. We only cared about one thing, and that was when interface indexes went below 0. So I want to talk about something a little bit more advanced. So we're going to go back into our manage reports, and we're going to create another new report. And we're going to use a custom table once again. And this report, I designed to look for empty custom properties. Now, why do you care about that? So the answer to that is if you use your custom properties correctly, then they are extremely helpful across the platform. You can use them in alerting, you can use them in reporting, you can use them to filter resources on your different pages, you can use them to do count limitations or report limitations or whatever. I mean, they're immensely useful. You can't create.
All right, I'm going to just jump in here, and I'm going to say that if you're not using custom properties, you are SolarWindsing wrong.
Yes.
I'm judging you now. That's all. That's all that we're doing.
Judging you now. Yeah, definitely. Custom properties are amazing, and I love them so much. I use them all the time, and I'm going to use them here. What we're going to do is look for empty ones. And why do we care about empty ones? So the answer to that is, if you're using custom properties in your alerting, let's say, we'll take a specific example. In your alerting, and you have alerts that are dependent on a custom property being filled out. Like maybe you have one that differentiates between the server team and the network team and whatever, and you have this alert set up to, if it's a network node, go to the network team, and if it's a server node, go to the server team. But you probably don't have anything set up for, let's say, if that field is not filled out. So no one will get alerted if it's not filled out. Now you can make custom properties mandatory, and you can pre-fill them with information as well. And I do recommend using those if it makes sense to. It doesn't always make sense to, but usually it makes sense to. That way you don't run into, fat fingering, you don't run into typos, you don't run into weird spaces or capitalization problems. They're just all symmetrical. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for things that don't have custom properties that we're using in this test environment that are important. So what we're going to do is we're going to stay on node because that's what we care about. We're going to switch to the advanced selector again because it is a little bit more, it gives you a little bit more flexibility on what you can pull in. Now we're going to go to select fields, and we're going to go down. We're going to go down this list. There's a lot of things in here, but what we're going to look for is our node's custom properties right there for us. Now we care about the decommission date, and we care about the purpose. And so we're going to say, we're going to select one, and we're going to say decommission date, and then we're going to say is equal to, and then just leave it alone. It's blank. Or we can come in here and say is empty, which we're going to use.
Empty, right.
So we're going to come in here. I'm going to add another one, add a simple condition. So you can add an advanced condition. You can add an and or block. So you can be a little bit more flexible as far as how you're doing this. And this looks exactly the same as your alert builder. So if you're already comfortable with alerts, this will be comfortable for you. We're going to add a simple condition, and we're going to go back into our custom properties. And
if you're not comfortable with the whole hierarchy here, you can always do a search. Just want to point that out, but we know where we're going.
Yeah, I know where I'm going. And also for custom properties, it is helpful. It's helpful if you have a bunch. I've seen environments that have hundreds of custom properties. So having a list is a little bit easier to process when you're trying to create these kinds of things than searching for specific ones, because you might forget one that was created, or you might come in here and look at this list and go, who made that and what are they using it for? So that definitely has happened. So we're going to select our purpose, and we're going to add that one. And we're also going to say is empty. Now, we don't want them both to be empty. We want to see when either one is empty. So I'm going to change this to an or condition. But just notice that there's also a must not. And then there's at least one child must not. So this is like an and not, and this is an or not. So we're just going to use or. Switch it to an or. We're going to create our data source. And we're going to call it nodes with empty CPs, because that's custom properties for me. You might not know what that is later, but I'll know what it is because I've been using Orion for a very long time. So we're going to add our columns that again took us right in. So we want to know what node it is, and we want to know we can go in here and search. So we can say,
so as you're searching, I just want to clarify for folks who are looking, what we did before is we set the condition of what's going to get listed in the report. We didn't say what's going to show up, what information. We just said that any node that satisfies this criteria, again, if you're familiar with alert triggers, then that is the alert trigger. But now what we're doing is we're saying this is the information that's actually going to show on the screen. The two don't have to necessarily be the same thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to come in here and we say we're going to select our caption, which is our node name, and we're going to select the two properties because we want to see them. Because if one is filled out and the other one's not filled out, then we still want to see that. So we're going to add them. And I want to talk about something else here. So before you saw me come in here and rename your column. So you can rename any of your columns. We know that now already. So I'm going to come in here and again rename this to make more sense for me. I'm going to rename it no name. And then I want to talk about some of these other options real quick. So we have these display settings here. This is really useful. So what we're going to do is this amazing little thing right here, details page link, is going to automatically create a hyperlink on our node name to take us to the node details page.
I'm so glad you showed that. Yes.
It's wonderful. And you can do that as well. On our previous report, we talked about interfaces. You can do it for interfaces. Anything that has its own details page, you can automatically add that details page length, and it's going to pull it through Swickle on the back end, which is awesome. So we're going to add that. There are a couple of other options there as well, but that one is, I think, the most useful and most important for being able to manage things through reporting.
It also means that if this report isn't just showing up on a knock screen that is sort of look, don't touch, that if this is a page that people go to, that things become clickable, and so that people can go through it. And it's not just, again, like you said, the node name. It can also be the interface or even, CPU or any of those other elements. So you can see a report that is displaying a list of problematic elements or things, and people can get right to work going to those things and updating them or fixing them or changing them. Sorry, I just had to...
Absolutely. So you notice there's a couple of other things. You can allow HTML tags. That's a little bit more advanced. I'm not going to get into it. You can hide the column. So if you want to have it for while you're looking at it, while you're making it, but you want to hide it for the eventual final report, you can choose to hide it, but leave it in your report.
For sorting.
Or for sorting, exactly.
It's also really good for sorting. If you want to sort by, like, say, date, but you don't want them to see, or grouping, but you don't want to see it, you can have it there. It's sorting or grouping, but it doesn't show. Sorry.
Absolutely. And then this is not relevant to what we're doing right now, but you have data aggregation options, which are, count, min, max, and that kind of thing. I don't care about that for what we're doing with this report, so I'm not going to add anything there. And you can also do some basic formatting for the visual aspect of your report. You can change your column widths, you can change your alignment for each field. And why you might care about that, especially if you have a lot of fields coming into one report. Like if I had, let's say, 10 columns trying to come into this, it's going to try and auto fit it as best as possible, but this might come in handy if you're using like if you want to do something that goes up on the knock screen and that's going to be a wider screen, you might want to adjust those column widths to make it fit better on that screen. And also you can use it for many other things. So like if I was using a field that has very small, it's like a single digit or double digit number in it, I don't need it to be as wide as my node name field. I don't need it to be the same width. So I might come in here and make some little adjustments to make it look better. So I just wanted to mention those real quick. And then you have some more fields down here. So if you needed to create a top report, top 10, top 50, whatever, or if you wanted to do a percentage of that, then you can do that as well. And then we have sorting and grouping, which Leon mentioned. You can use that. It doesn't have to be hidden columns. It can be any column in the report, in the table, any column, and the same for the grouping. I'm going to go ahead and, I was going to group by, and I'm not going to group by. And the reason for that is it's going to alter what the report looks like. I'll just show you real quick what I mean. So if I preview this resource with the fields as they are, with no grouping and no sorting, it's just going to show them in a kind of like a flat format. Now, if I go back and I want to sort because I need to sort, I want to sort by node name, and ascending is fine. You can change it to descending as well by just clicking it. And then if I create a group by, that's going to change the way my report looks a lot. So now it's very spaced out. And for this report, I don't want to do that. But if I was pulling a bunch of different metrics, let's say I wanted to have, my node name, my device name, and then I also wanted to pull all of the interfaces, group by is super useful. So you can show each of the interfaces under the nodes. But for this report, I'm not going to do the group by. I'm just going to do the sorting. So we're going to just delete that. Super easy. And once again, we're going to name it. And submit, and it'll take us back to our page. And we're going to name our report again. And the reason why I name all of these things, which seems kind of redundant if you're just doing a single resource and a single report with a single data source, it seems kind of redundant, and you may think that, and you may not bother with the renaming of them. But once again, I do like to have them named that way in case I later decide I want to add columns or I want to add content, I can know what the differentiating factor is there. And you'll notice I didn't mention this earlier, but you can change your logo. So it automatically defaults to the SolarWinds logo because it is your SolarWinds Orion instance. But if you wanted to change that to your company logo, you can definitely do that as well. And I kind of skipped past all of this stuff earlier, and I'm just going to take you through a couple of the options. So first, it will take you through a preview of what your report is going to look like. And you'll notice that these node names are blue because they're hyperlinked. And then you can hover over them and see, where it's going to take you. And it's going to take you to each of those node details pages. And you'll see some of these fields have information, but they don't have information in the other fields. So our report is doing exactly what we want it to. It's telling us where those fields are not filled out. Now, I might not care about particular devices because I don't need to alert on them for that particular alert or what have you. But you are going to probably care about some of them if you're using your custom properties in that fashion. So we're going to go to the next page. And the next page is going to take us into a couple of options here. You can give your report a description. If you're making a report that isn't going to make sense to somebody else, or that, you're going to be transitioning out of your position in a few months, or you're preparing to transition to another person. I've seen this a lot. Companies get shuffled around. Most likely, SolarWinds admin is not your only job. So there's going to be more than one admin, or you're going to be transitioning those responsibilities to somebody else. And in those cases, you may find a report description extremely helpful. Or if you are going to come back to this report at a later date and then look at it and not know what it is, you definitely want to have that report description filled out.
Right, we're back to help out future you by have present you explain to future you what you were thinking when you did this. But the reality is that we all, as IT pros, I think, understand that documenting what we're doing and why, you can put in who requested this, when they requested this, because a lot of times we're not, as monitoring engineers, we're not generating reports just for the fun of it. We're generating because somebody made a request.
Absolutely.
So you can say who the requester is and when they asked for an edit. And that way when they come back and say, but I don't understand, how come that data element is in there? Or how come it's not in there? And you can say, well, if you look at the description, you can see where you said, I hate that column, it's ugly or whatever, and I took it out, and now you want me to put it back, and please make up your mind, or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've used it kind of in that fashion as well, especially as a contractor coming into an environment that I don't own. So I'll come in there and write, created by Chrystal for so-and-so, because usually I'll have my own account. So it'll be marked that I'm the creator of this report. But if I created it for a specific purpose, or I created it for a specific team or anything like that, I like to make sure I come in here and put that in a report description, because once again, if someone comes in here later, or, as a contractor, you're not going to be there forever, most likely. So eventually when the contract is up or they've moved on to something else, then they'll be able to come back in here and say, oh, I know what this was doing. I know what this was for, if they ever need to edit it.
Right. And one more thing that actually we mentioned right at the beginning of this episode, but it's important, is you can share your reports on the content exchange.
Yes.
So if you put in a description, created by, and here's why, and here's what the purpose was, then you get a little bit of credibility, and you get your name out there too. But also people who are browsing through the content exchange really understand what this report is supposed to be doing.
Well, absolutely. And as Leon and I were both THWAC MVPs before we joined SolarWinds as employees, I think we both would say that the community is a fantastic place, and there are a lot of things out there that you can find, either reports or anything like that in the content exchange to pull into your environment. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't make this harder on yourself if you don't need to. I mean, It's time consuming sometimes, and you definitely don't always need to do that. And we have a great community, a great MVP space, and lots of people helping each other out. So definitely recommend checking that out if you have not.
Yes.
A couple of other things. So you can have, as I mentioned, custom properties are useful everywhere. You can also add custom properties to your report. We're not going to do that today. You can change the report category. So if you wanted to put it in a specific section, there's all of your report categories that already exist are here, or you can add a completely new one. So if you wanted to say create server team reports or something like that to make it easier for like new hires or new SolarWinds admins to understand what it was created for, or what team or anything like that, you can come create new categories. And you can also add limitations. So if you wanted to, by default, there's no report limitations, but you can add categories. So if you wanted to say, again, I'm going to reference this again, if you have different teams that are using SolarWinds and you have them limited by what they can see. So like if your server team is in there, they are, and I'm going to say they should only be able to see their equipment. There is absolutely no reason for them to see the network equipment or be able to fiddle with it in any way. So if your server team is in there and they have their account limited already, so they're not seeing the rest of the stuff, you can also limit what reports they can see. So they don't need access to networking reports or anything like that. Then you can put a limitation in there. You can categorize your reports, put them all together in specific spots and then say, okay, you get these reports and you get those reports, and you don't need any other reports. You often have a lot of people that can see your SolarWinds data, but they aren't admins, and they shouldn't be.
Yeah, and limitations on their own is a much larger topic. You can put limitations at the account level. You can put limitations at the view level. You can put limitations at the report level, and they can stack. But the idea is that if you build a report, they will obey account limitations.
Yes.
You don't have to put them in here also, but at the same time, you can make a report that is incapable of showing, like you said, network equipment, no matter who's looking at it or whatever. And that way, and that allows you to do things that you might not be comfortable or want to do, as the filtering, the data set that we did at the beginning of this example.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lots of options, which can be part of the problem. It can be overwhelming. So Leon mentioned also that you can schedule your report. So I just wanted to quickly show you can set up a schedule. So by default, it's always set to not schedule. But if you wanted to set up a schedule, then you can assign a schedule. So there's some that are already created, or you can create pre-formed ones. So it just has, like a very basic send it every day at 7 a.m. or whatever, and you can assign that schedule to as many reports as you want, or you can create individual schedules for the individual ones. And that schedule assignment looks very similar to the one that you set up for your alerting schedules. So it should also be familiar to you. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of that, because that is not what we're doing today. So I'm just going to say no schedule needed. And then it takes us to a summary where it shows us everything. This looks very similar to your alert creation summary as well, where it shows you what you did, shows you all the things that you created, and then you can preview it again if you want, or you can click this box here to show the report after saving. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to show the report after saving, and it's going to take us into our created reports. And from here, we could just go into those individual nodes and then go populate those custom properties, or we could keep this on a separate tab and go open up our manage nodes page and go do a bunch of them together, or manage custom properties page, and edit those a bunch together so that we can get that up to date and hopefully clear out this list, because we want to keep our Orion instance clean. So now we've shown you two reports that use the custom table resource, and I've gone through a little bit, I got a little bit more advanced and showed you a lot of the features that are available out of the box with the reports and what you can kind of modify. So I want to get into it a little bit deeper. I'm not going to go over those tags again. I'm going to go into a little bit more information. So I kind of skimmed over a couple of things earlier, and I want to show you those things. So we're going to go create another new report. And this report, yes, another one. And this report, I've kind of stylized capacity issues. And it's designed to kind of just show us what we're working with. So what we've got here is I kind of skimmed over the fact that there's all of these categories here in our resources. And I just used the reports one. And I will say that 9 times out of 10, when I create a report myself, I use these two resources. But there are a lot of other options. So I want to show you a couple of the other options that we have here and what you want to do. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to search resources, and I'm going to look for capacity, because I bet there's some pre-built things that are used for that. So what you can see is here, this is a bunch of stuff we have already pre-built resources. You've probably seen resources that look exactly like these when we look at our preview of our report on your node details or your interface details, or any of those pages are going to have something like this on them. You can see already we've got node capacity forecast. That's going to be on your node details page. You've got interface utilization forecasting also on your interface details page. So you can use those resources also in your reports. So we are going to use top 10 capacity problems. We're going to use top XX, and we're going to make it 10, because I don't want more than 10. That seems like too many. So this time it didn't automatically take us into the edit resource, you'll notice, because it's pre-built. But I want to go in there so you can see if there's options and what those options are. So these pre-built ones, so we can say, oh, I don't want to see all of these metrics. I want to see, CPU and memory and disk, but I don't need to see interface information, or vice versa, or anything like that. You can also filter it. So if you want to show specific interfaces or specific nodes, or if you want to filter by custom properties, you can do that as well. And your filter examples are there.
if you've ever edited any of the resources that are on the summary screens, that show filter example should be familiar. And if you haven't, that's where you'll also see it. But these are simple filtering things that actually have a lot of power built into them. You have to play around with it a little bit, but there's some really cool effects that you can get just out of those simple filters.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's many pre-built resources. I really would give you the recommendation to take a little bit of time to see what pre-built resources you can build into your report. Once again, I am not a fan of reinventing the wheel, so if it's already been created and I don't need to go through all the hard work of recreating it and figure out how those database tables are tied together so I can pull the data together, I'm not gonna. Also, the pre-built ones are usually very pretty, and you may not get something as good looking out of a custom resource because it's not gonna do all that formatting that SolarWinds has already done for you. So I just renamed it. It was called Top XX. It's doing 10 events. I can change that number if I like, but I'm not going to. And I take out the XX and I'm going to change it to 10 so that we know exactly what we're doing. And I'm going to submit that. Now I also want to add another type of resource that I didn't go over. So here you have these page formatting. And in here, you can add blank spaces to your report. Now, why would you want to do that? So I can think of a couple of reasons why you would want to add blank spaces. If you want to break up the data a little bit so it doesn't all run together, let's say you put 2 custom tables right one on top of another on top of another. Well, that data might seem like it's going to run together really easily. So it might make sense to add a blank space to kind of give yourself a visual differentiation between those 2 resources. So we can add a blank space. I'm going to add a short blank space here, and then I'm going to add another resource. But because I already showed you how to do the custom table resource, I'm not going to show you how to do this one. But what we're going to do is we would add here another resource and add a custom table resource to it, and we're going to get some more information on those interfaces. Now you can also change your page layout here. There's lots of options for formatting because we want pretty good looking reports. And of course, we would rename everything, give ourselves a subtitle if we need it, go through and create a schedule if we need it, and then we would see our summary. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the finished report. And this is our capacity issues report. Now you can see this resource that they've built, gorgeous. It's got coloring, it's got links already pre-made, it's got a lot of information there that maybe we didn't need, or we weren't going to be able to pull very easily. It would take a lot more work for me to go create this by myself rather than just adding it to the page. And then we've got our blank space so we can differentiate between the 2 resources. And we've got another report here. So I added a custom table for disks over 95% utilized. So I wanted to care about this capacity problem that I was having. And we also have links to those individual details pages. So now for our very last demo today, I want to build one more report, just one more. And I want to go over something that I glossed over earlier, which is going to be custom SQL/custom SWCL. Now, if you don't know what SWCL is the SolarWinds query language, and it is fantastic, and it makes beautiful things in the Orion website. You can also use it in the API to do that kind of work. So there's lots of information out there on that stuff already. And I will say that because it's built with SolarWinds in mind, a lot of times your resources and the data that you're going to be pulling in is going to be a lot cleaner and a lot prettier if you use the custom SWCL resources instead of custom SQL resources. And I will also say that the transition to custom SWCL from custom SQL is not very difficult. And Leon, why might we want to use custom SWCL?
So first of all, like you said, the transition, if you know SQL, SWCL isn't going to be much of a lift. But the main reason that we tell people is that it's future-proofing your queries. If you go with regular old SQL, and I was a hardcore hair on the knuckles, dragging on the ground SQL coder for a long time, because that's all you had. But the problem is that as we develop our products, as we expand things out, we add tables, the schema changes, and therefore your queries break because we move things around. It's not just that we add a table in space, we actually move data from one place to another, and so your SQL completely breaks down. Whereas SWCL, that's not going to happen. So that's your primary reason for converting things over and converting your brain over to SWCL.
Yes, and I will say, as someone who used to build things in custom SQL all the time, that exact thing happened to me, and that is why I started to switch to SWCL, because I had created a bunch of custom alerts and custom reports that were looking at things, and then we upgraded, and that was when the alerts and the reports moved to the web console. And if you didn't know, that also changed on the database backend, so they had new tables and everything was in a different spot, and all of those things broke, and so I had to go rebuild them from scratch. So if you can future-proof something, why wouldn't you?
Exactly. I'll also say that if you want to get started or get a sense of how the schema works under SWCL, the best way to do it is to download the Orion SDK. There's a whole studio there that you can browse through and find your tables and find your views and things. So it's not that hard, really.
Yeah, it's not that hard. Don't let it intimidate you. If you need to pull different data sets together from different tables that aren't tied together, SWCL is a good way to go. We have lots of resources out there. There's lots of great content put out there by community members that are already using custom SWCL and do some crazy things. There's some awesome stuff out there, and it's fantastic. So you should check it out. So once again, we're going to create this new report, and I'm going to use the custom table resource, but this time I'm going to use the advanced database queries equals SWCL selection. And I'm going to leave it on SWCL, but if you are insisting on SQL because you think that, it's better or whatever, I mean, I'm sure that lots of people could have the argument all day. You're welcome to use SQL, and you just switch over to SQL from SWCL. So I'm not going to get into the details of how I created this query. There's, like Leon said, there's lots of resources out there. I'm sure there's other videos on Black Tuesday Tips or on Lab or wherever that we've put out there on creating custom SWCL things. So I'm not going to get into the details of how I created this query. I'm just going to paste it in here. And we can preview right here to see if it works, which it does. So right now it's pulling in all of these fields. We're going to rename this. And what this query does, because I need to tell you that, what this query does is it is looking for CPU specifically, so it's not foolproof, CPU data that is not being updated. Now, why might you care about that? So what I noticed many years ago is that SNMP connection does not change your node status. You can lose connectivity to a Windows machine out there or something like that where you're using WMI, or if you're using, maybe a new firewall got put in and you're not connecting anymore, but ICMP still gets through. So your status is still getting updated, but you're not getting your statistical data anymore. And because you're not getting that statistical data anymore, you're losing all kinds of monitoring goodness. And we don't want that. Now, this is a little bit different now because you have the new changes to node status that came out in the 2019.2 release. So when I created this, that did not exist. I will say that. And it has been extremely useful for me to find out when devices stop reporting via SNMP or WMI, and then later when they added the agent via the agent. So if we're not pulling that information, I want to know, and I want to go fix it. So that's
and there's still, I think, there's still valid reasons why you would want to get availability, meaning up down, from ping, but you obviously want to know when it's not collecting statistics. So even though we have the ability now to determine availability using SNMP, which would tell you when SNMP stops, there's plenty of perfectly justified reasons why that's not an okay solution in your particular use case. So this report still has usable use to do things.
Yes, do all the things. It's just really an example for you to show what you can do. There's a lot of different joins in here. There's a lot of fields being pulled in from all over the place. So it's really a good example for you if you're going to start getting into it, of what it's doing. So, and what kind of functions and things can work. So, we're going to put that in there, and then we're going to create it. We're going to name it, and then we'll go through all the same rigmarole that we did before of adding columns. Now, when you do custom SQL or custom SWCL, the columns that are available to you are only going to be the columns that you pulled into your query. So you're not going to have all of the options that you had before with just the dynamic query selection, because it's no longer tied in the same way. So it's only going to pull what you specifically pull in. So anything you can think of that you might want to see in your report, go ahead and pull it into your select query.
Well, and I'm going to say, DIY is DIY. And what that means specifically, if you look down below, you've got the caption, the node name, but you also had to pull the URL for that, because if you want to make that caption clickable, you're going to have pulled in the URL along with it. You won't be able to use any other option to bring that in. So that's an example of what you'd have to, why you'd have to do that.
Right. And as mentioned, this is advanced. So this is definitely the most advanced thing we're showing you today. I will also point out that we are also pulling in icons. So you can see it's pulling in image files here. So that we're going to be using that. So I'm not going to go through all the rigmarole that we already went through. I'm just going to jump to our finished report. And again, these are all available to you on the Content Exchange. If you go to our final report, you can see we didn't end up using that icon. Why not? Maybe I just didn't feel like pulling it in. Maybe I want to later. You don't know. So what we're doing is, these are what they are. This is the collection type. So if we had things that weren't reporting anymore that were S&P or whatever, then you could come in here and change. You'd see what kind of type of collection it's doing. When was the last time that we got information from it? And what is our status description? So you can see this node status is critical and our CPU load threshold is critical, but the threshold is critical even though it's no longer collecting data. So that's very interesting. And a way of keeping a clean house, as I like to say. That's what most of these reports have been about, keeping your SolarWinds house clean. And I think that's very important for keeping your monitoring data good and clean and effective, because nothing irritates people more than getting continuous alerts from things that don't matter or they don't care about. They will start putting those in a special inbox folder, and they will no longer be paying attention to them, and then they're going to yell and scream at you because they didn't get their notifications that they needed. Well, they probably did. It was just lost somewhere in the noise. So that's really what I wanted to show you today. Just a couple of tips and tricks on making your reports a little bit better. And please feel free to ask any questions of us in the chat. We'll hang out for a little bit. And that is our final demo.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much.